Thank you very much for inviting me today to share some of our experiences at Emirates NBD. You covered some of it yourself, and you and I do share one thing in common. I grew up in a city that was 4 feet underwater too, except where I grew up we had no wooden shoes, so you're a bit lucky. But I also cheated. I was in Holland last year, and so I know about the shoes.
Okay. The storyline is different.
Yeah. I was also pleased to note it's always nice when somebody goes before you and says the average time for fast close is 43 days, 30 days in the GCC, etc. I'll have you know that Emirates NBD published their results this year with a 21-day close period. Thank you. And we do it consistently every quarter. So October 22nd we'll be publishing results again, and even during July, which was the Ramadan period and summer out here, we published pretty much around the same timeline. It's typically 22nd or 23rd, depending on which is the Wednesday that we choose to go to the market, or sometimes Thursday. But this was not always the case. And I also want to break the story into two parts. I will focus obviously today on the SAP Disclosure Management tool, but a lot of it has to happen internally. And I think, Klaus, you talked about it in your first presentation. All your internal controls need to be in place. All your, I would say, basic disciplines need to be in place. For example, one of the first lessons that we learned is the best way to achieve fast close is to close your books fast, which means the month end has to be the month end. You cannot keep your books open forever for adjustments to keep flowing in thereafter. Then you begin to lose control. So we did a lot of things in Emirates NBD over the last couple of years to bring that process to a close. What does 31st mean? And there are a number of things you have to do, which means your expenses, your accruals, your payroll, all has to go in before that date. It doesn't matter which industry you're in, whether you're in banking, I'm in banking, you could be in non-banking. We still have to run the payroll, we have to run the expenses, we have to run your inventory, your valuations, all that you have to happen and make it happen before the 30th or the 31st. Often people used to say, let's do it after the month end. We brought most of it before the month end. So that took off, I would say, about a week to 10 days from the reporting process. We still could not deliver the reports in what we considered the optimum time. 3 years back, it was taking us close to the 40 days that you were talking about, and we wanted to come down to 21 days. And this 40 days was after having done all the internal discipline issues. That last mile, as I call it, really came from using disclosure management tools. And initially we did a cottage industry in-house. Having learnt our lesson, we then migrated to the more industrial solution because we knew exactly what we wanted, and between the two we managed to shave 10 to 14 days on the published result. But the real prize is not there. The real prize is in what happens before, because frankly my reporting team is here. They'll tell me they can go to the market on the 10th of the month if they wanted to. So that period from the 10th to the 20th is really our time to analyze, to get the messages right, to talk to the various stakeholders, be they the auditors, the board of directors, in some instances the regulators, to get all our stories, our messages aligned, so that when we do go to the market, we don't have people asking us unnecessary questions. And that frankly takes a lot of, I would say, planning, organization. And I'll take you through our journey with the SAP Disclosure Management tool. There we are. So when did we implement it? We implemented it formally last year. Q4 was internal reporting, testing, UAT, playing with the tool, but at the end of Q4, when we went to market in January, we had officially and formally used the SAP Disclosure Management tool. And what does it do? It's really a collaborative tool. It helps bring multiple data sets, the work of multiple people together into one repository where you can control, you can audit. And when I say control, it's not just the data, but it's also version control, because all of you who are involved in the reporting process know that stories change. Somebody will want to pass an entry. In the banking industry, there are certain critical entries like the provision entry that doesn't always get agreed before the 31st of December. You need to have discussions with your risk manager, with your auditors. That entry could come through on the 7th or 8th, by which time everything else has been sealed, but it has a knock-on impact on multiple schedules, multiple disclosure notes, and how do you then rush it and make sure as you're rushing you do not make any errors. That's one example. Another example could be a shareholder call, which all of us are quite familiar with. Through the board, you have to make a dividend recommendation. The dividend recommendation cannot be made until you know what the profits are. So you would never know what is the likely dividend on the 31st. You'd know that only later as you discuss with your board and make a proposal. And for banks, we have to have that within our financial statements as a proposed dividend even before we go out to the market. So there are definitely two key entries that come a week or so after the year end, and yet we are expected to be able to close pretty soon thereafter. Also, if I look at our financial statements, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's over 100 pages. It contains multiple tables, contains multiple notes to the financial statements, both of which number over 50. So if it was just the first 3 pages, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statements as we traditionally know, and I'm using layman's language out here, that's easy. And I do recall, I think Asim, it was 2 years back, we had one minor change that the board of directors asked us to do, and I took the signing page back to them in 5 minutes, because that was easy. You just change one number, change the total, take the signing page back to them. But the rest of the team worked 24 hours non-stop to be able to get the report out to market before 8 a.m. the next day when the DFM opened, because it impacted multiple schedules, multiple notes, and in this part of the world it's also translation from English to Arabic. So we had our translators waiting, we had our company secretary waiting, and that was not a night I would want to go through again, I can assure you. As far as my board was concerned, oh, that's a 5-minute job, I signed off. Why are you spending all night doing nothing? But I'm sure we've all been through it. Can I have a show of hands? How many people in this room are finance people? Okay, and how many are technology people who support finance? So who are the rest?
Support both.
That's good, but I tell you, it's scary stuff. The difficult things, or what seems difficult, is easy to resolve. What seems easy is the most difficult to resolve. So we spend a lot of time validating, cross-validating, trying to make sure numbers tie up, because in the P&L we would have reported 102 dirham. By the time you break it up in a subsidiary schedule in the notes to the financial statements, because of rounding, it rounds up to 101. Can we necessarily trap that at 3 a.m. in the morning? I doubt it. But that's where this tool, or some of the power that this tool gives us, helps us. So what were some of the challenges we faced? Clearly, risk of human error. There were multiple people, multiple tables, multiple spreadsheets. All have to come together. And let's not forget, formatting is a nuisance. Anybody who's tried to merge Excel tables into Word documents and vice versa knows that it will go wrong. It has to go wrong, especially when at the last minute you add a column or a row and it suddenly looks out of whack because the font is squeezed, and you can't have that in a public financial statement that goes out. Difficulties in versioning and track changes. Each time something is changed, how do we know what changed? Do I have to read 123 pages all over again before I sign off, or can I zoom into just one page? In the old days, I had to read 123 pages. Now I know I just need to read section A, B, and C, and that's highlighted, that's underlined, and that's explained with comments. Reformatting, I just talked about it. This, frankly, is the worst of it all. If I had to put a timeline to it, it took us almost 3 days just to get the formatting sorted out between the Word section, the Excel section, the Arabic section, the English section, the page break that follows, and you have to make sure that both move in sync. And later, when I talk about some of the showstoppers we had, some of the showstoppers were also with the formatting and the templates that you use. Now, this does not mean that our work goes away. What it does mean is that a lot of planning and preparation designing happens up front rather than post facto. But once you do it up front, you can freeze it, and at least you know you're doing it at a time when you don't have pressure. So if I were to look at elapsed time, probably you spend as much time in the reporting process, but what the tool gives you is the flexibility to do it at different stages during the month. More importantly, things like the template can be sorted out well before the year end, so that you have what I call a frozen view of what a potential financial statement would look like without the numbers. And I'll come to the numbers one by one. In the old days, we didn't have workflow approvals and automation. Now I know exactly who's the maker, who's the checker, who's the reviewer, who's the approver, and we can also add an auditability layer to this. So we know exactly where the document is stuck, we know exactly who hasn't submitted his table, and we know exactly who to chase. And then we did talk about last minute changes. They do happen. We try to avoid and minimize them. But as I said, in the nature of my industry, there are at least 2 numbers that will get decided after the year end. So what did we want to achieve with the help of this tool? Clearly reduce the time to market. I think that has to drive a lot of decisions, and time to market is important because I do agree, Klaus, with what you said, that the quality improves because you start paying attention to a lot of things, because you know you get only one chance to get it right. You don't get a second pass, you don't get a third pass. So a lot of things get scrutinized very finely when you know you have limited time. Automation definitely helps. If you make a change, in the past we had to type in the Word format. Now we just insert it into the tool through the template upload options, and you can almost print instantly. So a change is, I would say, real time, whereas in the past, even though the change on an Excel table can be made real time, by the time you went through the cycle, you'd waste half a day. And if you had a second change and a third change, that's all cumulative. Versioning, we do keep version 1, version 2, version 3 in history, so we can always roll back if we don't like it. This quarter, for example, when we did our half 2 results, Emirates NBD repaid the Ministry of Finance 4.8 billion of Tier 2 capital after the quarter end. But since it's a significant event after balance sheet date, we would have to make a note. Now, we weren't quite sure whether we would pay it before or after the results publication date. So we paid on the 20th as it happened, and our results publication was on the 23rd, as I told you. But it could have well been payment after the 23rd because we were waiting for approvals from the Ministry of Finance and the UAE Central Bank. So we literally had two versions running in parallel. There was a version A without payment, there was a version B with payment. And at a flick of a button on the 20th, we just switched one off and switched the other on. And it was as simple as that. In the past, that would not have been possible. I talked about track user activity, organize and structure information with intuitive workflow for users. And this is really collaborative work because we have our risk management guys giving risk management information. We have the asset liability guys giving the maturity information. We have somebody else doing the cash flow analysis. All this can come together, and once it comes together, you can cross-validate. So nobody can put in something that doesn't tie in with what the others are doing. And minimize IT intervention. And this is no disrespect to my IT colleagues in this room, but when time is short, the last thing you want to run is to your IT colleague and say, my machine is broken or my software doesn't work. Here, each and every one of us can be a power user, and we can configure the tool. Obviously, the core stuff still has to be done by IT in terms of the server interactions and so on, but I'm talking about the user interface. We can control and we can decide how we want to set it up. I have my team members here. You can talk to them during the break. They've all lived through it, I would say, through the test of fire. And some of them, in fact, Asad, raise your hand, please, has seen it from both sides. He was our auditor a few years back when we were doing it the old way, and now he's one of our colleagues doing it the new way, and he'll tell you the difference between the two, both as an auditor and as somebody who's doing it in the team. I talked about the revalidation, the last minute changes, and rounding off. I mean, rounding is probably the biggest pain in the neck you can ever face, because things can round up or down differently in different tables, and we have the same, I would say, validation total appearing in multiple pages, but we have different dimensions. One would be a geographic analysis of assets, one would be an economic sector analysis of assets, one would be maturity analysis of assets, and we can't afford to round it three different ways. And yet, by definition, that is what you would get if you do it the old way with Excel spreadsheets and then typing it on to a Word document. And you don't need to answer this question, but those who take the approach of taking an Excel output, typing it onto Word, how many times have you suddenly realized there was $1 difference in the rounding? Because somebody else will come and tell you, you don't notice it yourself. So what were the business benefits? And here I'm talking about business benefits from the finance team perspective. The roll forward of the year and the period. In the past, it used to take a couple of hours, sometimes days. Now we can just snap our fingers and the roll forward data is done. Quarter on quarter, year on year, half year and half year. And you don't have to worry about auditing those. You can also change the hierarchies there. Not quite XBRL, but similar functionalities as well. We've talked about reduction in preparation of the financial statement time, reduction in the roll forward. That is very critical because all this you can do before 31st December or 30th September, whereas in the past we had to do it all after in one document in one pass. So it's really splitting up your work and doing it in different times, controlling it at different times. Track changes, for me, that's one of the most important things because I read 100 pages only once, the next time I read 2 pages, the next time I read 2 paragraphs, and finally I read just 1 word and we are done. So that helps a lot in reviewing, in signing off as well. human error. You cannot imagine how much importance I give to it. We've all known that any company that publishes and then has to change its financial statements will be severely punished by investors, by the market, by the regulators. That's not something we can afford. To me, that is suicide. And in the past, I can tell you I was a God-fearing man. Every time I sign, I pray to God, may this be okay. Now, I still fear God, but at least I don't have to worry too much about this. Well, you have an option to you have an option to switch to something, and then we talked about the last minute changes. That happens, and even if it doesn't happen, at least you know if it happens, you can face it bravely. And we've been able to achieve all this, I would say, with the tool. Now there are a few disclosure management tools out there in the market. Today, obviously, we are in an SAP forum, and we chose SAP. We looked at all these capabilities, and we found that the SAP tool follows the intuitive logic that a finance man would follow on the ground, the steps that we would follow. And it's not on the slide, but I'll tell you that when we looked for a reference case, SAP offered their own financial reporting team as a reference case. So when we were talking to them, we were talking to, not to the IT people, not to the software, the hardware people, we were talking to the finance staff within SAP and asking them, how do you use this tool, how does it help you? And not only were they able to answer our questions in layman terms, accountant to accountant, but later they were also available to us to help us through critical phases when we had challenges in the implementation. How do we address this? And they were able to give us ideas, oh, we faced the same problem, this is how we tackled it. So it was truly an organization coming together is what I would say, because often you don't, I don't think I've ever gone and marketed for a client for Emirates NBD, but it's good to see within the SAP organization this form of cooperation. Very quickly to go through, as I said, the entire SAP team and their partners were there with us literally 24/7. Not that we had to work 24/7 too often. They had dedicated staff. There were 2 staff who were literally seated with us, part-time with our IT folks, part-time with our finance folks, understanding the chain end to end and helping us through the implementation. And then there were showstoppers, as I said. The real showstoppers were more in the formatting, page breaks, templating, but yet the entire organization was behind us to fix that. There was a time when everything else worked except the page break, and the English would flow one way, the Arabic would flow the other way, as you know. Trying to get that resolved was a challenge, but our team in SAP did manage to do that very easily. And finally, we have continuous support after the event, not that we need much of it. So we are quite happy with the tool. As I said, it's not so much the date we publish. Asim keeps telling me we have the financials ready by the 8th. The reality is the financials were ready on the 7th, right? He likes to keep that one day for himself. But that means the auditors can look at it, we can look at it, and I probably have 2014 as my best year for reporting because it has the least worries in the process. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
So that actually means you went down from 40 to 7, not from 40 to 21. Those 14 days are internal work that you're doing.
More like 30 to 7, I would say, because there was always a little bit of a buffer that you had. But yes, it's really 30 to 7 is what I would say.
Any other objective that you have?
From a reporting perspective, well, this has nothing to do with the tool, but every one of us hates to read a 120-page document.
You want to shrink it?
Certainly looking to shrink it would be something that would be within the target, but without giving up on the value of the information.
How are you planning to do so?
Well, we'd have to look at each note and each disclosure and check its relevance, and also I can assure you it wouldn't be shrinking the font. I'll keep the font, but do we have to repeat something 2 or 3 times? Do we say it differently? These are things that we need to look at. Now, we are not bad. I can tell you one of the global banks has a 500-page report. We are only at 120 odd pages. What would a target be? I do not know. I talk to industry colleagues all over the world. I am a member of the International Accounting Standards Board's Advisory Council. So we meet thrice a year to discuss issues including XBRL. I was a regulator in Singapore responsible for checking on XBRL and financial statements as well before I joined Emirates NBD. So these are very topical matters. So it's quality versus quantity, as you know. It's a tough balance. Clearly you can say more, but the question is, are you saying more in an informative manner, or are you saying more because you want to confuse everybody because nobody knows where to look? Now that's right. So we often give 2 documents. There's the full financial statements, which if somebody is interested in, they can go through. And there's a 20-page investor presentation pack and PowerPoint, both of which are available on our website, both of which we publish to the financial markets, the DFM. So people can choose the short version or the long version, both are there.
What is the mandate from DFM in terms of disclosing the results? How many days is it?
Oh, the DFM 45, and then there's a time limit to hold the AGM after that on the annual as well. Most organizations, the banks, as you will see, tend to gather around the 20-something date, all the major banks, and then the non-banks come a little bit after that.
I plan to use the software in other parts of the organization. We work in the Netherlands with Achmea. They have now to do the annual report, do the quarter report, press release, sustainability reporting, solvency reporting. Is that also your plan?
Well, we'll certainly try and put our investor relations pack on the disclosure management software, because it's really using the same information as well.
Yeah.
And there the only challenge we faced, I wouldn't say it's a challenge, it's something that we haven't come to. In the past, we are dealing with Excel and Word. Now we'll have to deal with PowerPoint charts as well. So how do you integrate a PowerPoint chart? I know the tool is capable of doing it, but we wanted to take it in stages.
So what is the next step for Emirates NBD to maximize on the solution that you have implemented with disclosure management? Are you looking into, for example, XBRL as next stage to have your reports generated in XBRL, for example, or?
Well, XBRL is something that the regulator does want. ESCA does ask for the top level reports to be given to them in XBRL. They haven't gone down into the details. Mm-hmm. So I would say as the regulator moves to further details, we may want to get down there, but right now there is no real need to do it. Mm-hmm. Plus, within the regulatory world itself globally, XBRL is evolving. The International Accounting Standards Board does publish its taxonomy, but they've recently reviewed it and come up with a full new taxonomy. I think we in the Middle East are a few years behind where the rest of the world is. But a lot more than publication to the markets in terms of financial statements, you'd see that banking regulators and insurance regulators have used it more for what we call non-public data. Mm-hmm. And I guess eventually even this market will look at it. I know folks in Abu Dhabi within the central bank have looked at it before.
Mm-hmm.
select a disclosure tool which is different from your normal legacy system, which you have?
Well, we use Oracle as our general ledger and our ERP applications, and we did debate that should we have the same tool sitting on top or should we have a different tool sitting on top. But eventually, if you look at it, you never have one thing does everything, right? I'm sure you carry 2 phones, right? So do all of us, right? Plus a tablet and plus something else. So to imagine that everything will come into one device in one place doesn't really happen. Equally, looking for the best of breed in everything is also no good because you may end up with too many disparate solutions. But in this particular instance, what we were looking for is really something that could give us what a disclosure management system needed to do. The good thing we realized is it can sit on top of everything. So tomorrow we can change our Oracle into XYZ, it would still work. We could have a different consolidation tool, it would still work. So whereas some of the others would work only with their system. So this gives us the flexibility.
What's the decision from the CFO's angle, or how open was the IT in terms of?
Oh, you have to take them together with you, isn't it? There is a scoring where you look at the technology aspects of it and you look at the business user aspect of it. So it's a composite score at the end of the day, and SAP did win that composite score. Plus, as I said, to me, it's not the pre-sales that matters, it's the after-sales that matters, and definitely the team here in the room have done credit to themselves in the after-sales. Thank you. We'll be around to take any one-on-one Q&A as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.